Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to explore our magical electional opportunities we're going to have between our Cancer new moon on the 25th of June until the Leo new moon until the 24th of July. So it's been a minute since we've been able to have a video. I went to a conference, then I got sick, which took me out of the running for a little bit. Didn't really feel like recording and didn't feel like talking for very long, which is something that you need to do for this. But today we're going to have about 10 different elections, hopefully. In the first pass, at least it was 10 different elections, stuff for everywhere in the world. So hopefully we're going to sit down and have a good time. For those of you who have seen or check in with or kind of go back and have taken notes on the year ahead planetary elections video that I did back in January, you'll know that we're sort of entering the what I'm calling benefic summer phase, where we're starting to see an increase in elections for like Venus in Taurus, Jupiter in Cancer, the Sun in Leo. And then I think we have a little bit of a break until we pick up again, I think in October, as another kind of busy month for Planetary Talisman. So if you're in the market for one of those, now's your chance to kind of shine. But we're going to go ahead and dive on in. So our first opportunity is going to be for the 9th Lunar Mansion. And the 9th Mansion is one that is a little bit more scary in some instances. It depends on the phase of the moon and how you use it, kind of a thing. So in a waxing phase, which is what we have now, we're going to use it more for spiritual protection. It's more about warding, about keeping things safe, about sending off things out that are trying to get to us. In a waning phase, we use it a bit more offensively towards other people. So just, write that down. Just keep that in mind, in the back of your mind somewhere. But for this election, we're going to have it for all three of the locations that we typically survey: North America, Western Europe / Northern Australia, and Northern Africa and Australia. That's where that came from. But taking a look at our North American version, here this is going to take place on June 26th at around 7:06 in the morning. And here we're going to have the moon in the 9th mansion, and she is going to be applying this sextile to Venus here in Taurus. And so I always really prefer it when we're doing more defensive type magics, more like spiritually warding type stuff, to have the moon apply to a benefic planet. Venus is not my first choice, but Venus in Taurus, it's hard not to want to use that. Even though we don't typically take the essential dignity of the planet for Lunar Mansion connections that seriously, it's not that big of a deal. It is sort of a nice thing to have. But really the bigger takeaway here is Venus as a benefic planet who is capable of providing some measure of protection against outside forces. That's really the main takeaway here. At the same time, we have the moon who rules the first house because Cancer rises. The moon is the ruler of the first house here. She's not afflicted by Saturn. We're way past the square. We're not afflicted by Mars. We're far enough away from the sun to be visible and not combust. For the moon, that's around like 12-ish degrees. Well, I guess it's a complicated thing, isn't it? So combustion, usually I say combustion goes until 7.5 degrees past the sun. That's really what I'm most worried about. But with the moon, we have kind of like a special consideration where she needs to be 12 degrees past the new moon. That's when she's first visible in the sky, because the moon goes through like a 36-hour period of darkness where she gets so close to the sun before kind of the new moon phase where she's not visible for any part of the night. And then again, after she comes so far out the other side to where we get kind of that first waxing crescent, that first visible waxing crescent. So that's really what we're aiming for here. The moon here is, of course, 15 degrees separated from the sun, so well within that. But yeah, the moon has that kind of special 12-degree kind of rule of thumb for how far away she needs to be from the sun to be considered, to still be visible, to still be like a visible presence in the night sky. The Western European and Northern African version of the 9th Lunar Mansion is going to look a little bit different. It's going to play into some of the same key things, but here we're going to have the moon now on the midheaven in the 9th Mansion instead of on the ascendant, like she was in the North American version. We're still going to be applying that sextile to Venus, who again, as a benefic planet, is able to provide some measure of protection, safety against bad things, against intruders, against whatever coming our way. Venus now rules, because we've moved the moon off the ascendant, Venus now rules the ascendant, which makes us look at her a little bit more. But she's not afflicted by Mars or Saturn. She's not combust the sun. She's not retrograde. She's not in the 12th house. There's nothing that would really keep us from wanting to use Venus as the ruler of the first house here. And just all in all, a good setup for this. It's always nice when we have the moon applying to benefic planets, because we're able to sort of draw in on a lot of their, or not draw in, I guess, but share in their beneficence and what they're trying to do and their good-naturedness, and apply that towards our goal. whatever that might be. Of course, we don't always need the benefic planets to be able to do that. Sometimes we can get away with it from using some more morally shady planets, we'll say. But when it comes to physical safety type things, I always try to focus on the benefics more than the malefics. Malefics can be useful in certain situations, but I don't know, it's just easier to play it safe, I guess. And then finally, for our 9th Lunar Mansion charts, the Australian version is going to take place on June 26th at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And it's going to look much more similar to the Western Europe and Northern African version. Here we've got the moon in the 9th mansion on the midheaven. If I can go to this rectangle, there we go. Still maintaining the sextile to Venus. It's the furthest out aspect that the moon is. It's the furthest out Moon-Venus aspect between the three charts. Just that's how Australia rolls. But we still have this connection to this benefic planet. Venus rules the first house in this chart as well, which makes us, again, double check her position. Not afflicted by Saturn. We're not in a square aspect here. We're getting closer. We're getting closer to the square of Mars, about 14 degrees away, 20 to 4. And that's fine. I don't think that that's a big deal. We're not within orb. It's not something to worry about. Same with the last selection too. We're not there yet to worry about. I wouldn't start worrying about it until we get within like 7-ish degrees for these two planets. Astrologers tend to have their own sort of comfort zone with orb, with aspects orbs. So I would say just follow whatever you normally do. But that's my measurement. I use the moiety rules if you want to go down that rabbit hole of doing planetary math. Not just about. But this is fine. Venus isn't afflicted by Mars or Saturn. She's too far away, way too far away from the sun to have to worry about combustion. She's not retrograde, and she's not in the 12th house. Those are the big things that I worry about with the ruler of the first house. So there's no reason why we can't move forward with this. Also, the ascendant degree isn't afflicted by Mars or Saturn. There's not a malefic in the first house, so there's just nothing really to worry about with this selection. Everything looks pretty solid insofar as that goes. And that is our 9th Lunar Mansion elections. Our next electional opportunity is going to be North American and Australian. Western Europe, North Africa will not get an option for this one. And it's going to be for a Procyon fixed star talisman. Procyon is the main star of the little dog constellation. It's located in the throat of the dog. And typically talismans for Procyon are used for one of three things, either to help grant favors from people in authority or from the spirits, one of those two. It helps to give power over magic, which is not something that is very well described of what that means in the text, and something that I think a lot of kind of modern day practitioners are still trying to hammer out what the details of that actually means, so join the club. And then finally, it has some health-preserving powers as well. So there is sort of a like medical, preventative medicine, helping to keep situations from deteriorating further aspect of it as well. So if you're in the market for any of those three things, if you're currently trying to get something from somebody, you need some favors, need to cash in some favors from people. If you would like to level up your magic stat, I guess, or if you are, of course, going through any sort of health issue or trying to put off going through a health issue, then Procyon is a great start. I really like this. I really like Procyon. It's a good start. I was going to say it's one of the favorites, but I was going to say it's one of the favorites for the Patreon group, but I feel like it constantly gets outvoted from whenever there's an opportunity for one. I feel like it constantly gets outvoted by other options for some reason, but I like it. I'm not sure why it's not doing better. Don't sleep on Procyon, I guess we'll say. But so our elections, like I said, are going to be for North America and for Australia. The North American version of the chart is going to take place on June 26th at 1436. June 26th is going to be a busy day, is what you're going to find out. And so Procyon's projected ecliptical degree is 26 degrees of Cancer, so you want to get that somewhere either on the midheaven or the ascendant. I like how I said somewhere, like there are a lot of options to choose from. You want to get it somewhere, but you want to get it in one of two places. That's the best. That's all you can do. And then you want to get the moon to apply to that star. I don't agree with Agrippa's decision of including aspects to the stars. I think that's silly and completely outside of the tradition of astrology. But, we're going to just keep rolling with that and wonder what Agrippa was up to. And at the same time, we want the moon to apply to a planet that's of the nature of that star. We need to have the moon is always going to be applying to another planet unless she's void, I guess. So it makes the most sense to have the planet she's applying to be harmonious with the star. And one of the better ways to do that is through the idea of stars having natures described to them. One of the earliest methods of categorizing stars was by assigning them planetary natures, usually a combination of planetary natures. So Procyon, for example, is said to be of the nature of Mercury and Mars. So for a Procyon talisman, you would want the moon to ideally apply to either Mercury or Mars. There's probably is a preference depending on what exactly you want the talisman to do, just because Mercury has its own things that it does very well, that they do very well, and Mars has his own things that he does very well. So trying to find that. So Mercury might be a really good option to use for like having a better sense of like the second option of like having more power over magic, as the Picatrix describes it. Or not the Picatrix, I'm sorry, Agrippa, as Agrippa describes it. And that's because Mercury has some sort of like mythological or legendary connection with arts of magic, the Hermetic arts, magic, alchemy, and astrology. Mars is probably a good option for preserving the health, for defending health, protecting the body. Whereas Mercury, on the other hand, is probably also really good for protecting the health of Mercury-ruled body parts, like lung health or nervous system health, things like that. So there are ways that you can tweak it or specialize it to fit within the theme of the planet that the moon is applying to, which I think could be something to be useful for or think about. But it's very odd. It's very, how do I put this? It's very uncommon that we get anything resembling options with fixed star talismans or any kind of talismans, right? It's not like you can just make a Mercury, it's not like you can make a Procyon talisman with the moon applying to Mercury one month and then get the moon applying to Mars the next month. It never works that way. So you don't get a whole lot of options to kind of pick and choose. Anyway, back to the election instead of me just talking. The moon applies to Mercury, who's the nature of Procyon, who's said to be of the nature of Mercury and Mars. So we have all this checks out. We've got Procyon on an angle, the moon applying to that star by degree, and then a moon applying to a planet who's of the nature of that star. Then we just go through our checklist to make sure everything's fine. The moon isn't afflicted by Mars or Saturn, which is great. The moon's not combust, which is great. We check on the ruler of the first house, because this always represents the person for who the talisman is going to be working through, or for, I guess we could say. And that's going to be Venus over here in Taurus. Venus is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. We're still pretty far away from the square of Mars. Venus isn't combust. She's not retrograde. She's not in the 12th house. So she, according to my sort of list of rules at least, is doing perfectly fine. People might be upset that she's conjoined the 8th house cusp. I don't care. So this would be a really good option for a Procyon fixed star talisman for people who are looking to get involved in fixed stars. And I think Procyon is a really good one to start with. But yeah, that is the North American version of the Procyon chart, or the Procyon talisman. And then the Australian version takes place on June 27th at 9 in the morning. Like 9:02 is what this is set for, but somewhere around 9 in the morning. And here we're just going to have the moon on the ascendant instead of on the midheaven like we did in the North American version. So we've got Procyon again at 26 degrees of Cancer as its projected ecliptical degree. The moon at 25 degrees Cancer immediately applies to that degree by conjunction, so she's getting there on the ascendant here. And furthermore, she continues to apply to the conjunction of Mercury, who, like we said, is of the nature of Procyon. They share a nature in some way, where it is said to be the nature of Mercury and Mars. Let's see. The moon rules the first house, so we're not really worried about Venus at all in this chart. She's not super relevant to it. And the moon is unafflicted by Saturn, getting more, I guess, to the trine after the conjunction with Mercury. And unafflicted by Mars. We're far enough away from the sun, now 20 degrees. The moon is definitely visible in the sky as a waxing crescent. So all of our pieces here are set for a Procyon fixed star talisman. So if you need favors from people of authority, to have command of the powers of magic, which who doesn't? I mean, that's why we're here, right? And then to help preserve the health, Procyon is a great option, and it's coming up really soon. So our next sort of little segment of time here is going to be about Venus planetary talismans. For those of you who saw the year ahead video on planetary elections, these elections are already going to look familiar to you. You've seen these before. So here's your reminder about them. For those who haven't seen that, here it is. Here it's coming. So there's two different options for Venus talismans. One of the options is going to be for North America and Australia. Western Europe actually gets two different options. They have it work out such a way that they get to take advantage of two different options. Or I guess I should say that they have a second option, whereas the other locations miss out on it. But we're going to go ahead and talk about North America. Then we're going to go to Australia and do theirs. And then we're going to go and talk about Western Europe's two options, just to kind of get that segmented off. So North America, Venus Planetary Talisman is going to be June 28th at around 3 in the morning. 3:06 is what this is set for. And here we're going to have, our classic rules for planetary talismans are planet in sign of dignity, Venus in Taurus, check. Planet in sign of dignity on ascendant or midheaven, Venus in Taurus on ascendant. Perfect. We're getting there. It's got to be the planet's day or hour, and right now you can't see this because it's cut off from how I have the screen set up, but it's a Venus day and a sun hour at this time. So check Venus day. Perfect. And then this is a terrible sun. I don't know I'm not good at drawing circles with my hand. Whatever. It's this, deal with it. Wait a second. Maybe I can save this. Did it. I'm not good at freehanding circles with a mouse at all. I'm not going to make excuses. And then our final piece is we need the moon to apply to that planet, and we have the moon applying a square to Venus in Taurus from Leo. Squares obviously are not the most ideal aspect, but they're better than nothing. Definitely better than oppositions, which are trash. So we do have that connection between the moon and the planet that we're working with, which is super important. And then we're just running through our list of things that we don't want to have, which is like the ascendant and the planet afflicted or the moon afflicted. And we don't have that in these cases. Venus and the ascendant are on the same degree, which is great, really narrows it down. And they are not in a bad aspect with Saturn. They're not in a bad aspect with Mars. They're not combust the sun. Venus is not retrograde, anything like that. Similarly for the moon, she's not conjoined Mars. She's 20 some odd degrees away. She's not opposed to Saturn, or she's not affected by Saturn, and she's not combust the sun. So all of our main points are taken care of here. We have all the things that we do want with the planet in dignity, the planet on the angle, occurring during a planet's day or hour. Both would be great, but either will suffice, and the moon applying an aspect to that planet. And then none of those points are afflicted by an outside malevolent planet messing it up, or there's no sort of like affliction to the target planet, Venus in this case, through like retrogradation or anything like that. So everything here looks really good, and this is going to be our first of the Venus planetary talismans. But the only option for North America, at least for this month, I have to go back and think. I'd have to go back and look at the stuff to see if there are other options later on through July. I don't remember there being, but whatever. The Australian version looks very similar to the North American version. That's going to take place on June 28th at about 4 in the morning. And here it's kind of more or less the same things. Venus in dignity on the ascendant here. This is Venus's day and Venus's hour, which is really nice to have both of them. And the moon applies the square aspect to Venus. We've got a bit of a gap here. It's about, what is this? 18 degrees? 14 degrees. It's 14 degrees. I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to cut out the pause. The Moon-Venus square has a bit of a gap to it. There's about a 14-degree gap, which isn't super great. We've come to find out that the tighter the aspect with the moon and the planet that she applies to, it's one of the indicators of the talisman working like quickly and effectively. Whereas the larger that gap is and the slower the moon is, it seems to take longer for the talisman to kind of like get up to speed. That moon, that moon's speed and connection quality really seems to impact the talisman's effectiveness. Not effectiveness, I don't mean that. It doesn't make it a little weaker. It just prolongs it, and those are two different things. So not ideal. We would want this to be closer than it is, but it is a connection that way. It is the moon's next connection, and all of these points are also unafflicted. So it does end up fitting what we need. It fills all the criteria of what we need, and there's no afflictions here between the moon or the ascendant or Venus to compromise it in any meaningful way. So another good option here for Australia, and it's great that everybody's kind of getting to take in some Venus and Taurus options, because some years, the thing about Mercury especially, but even Venus, they're just in their signs of domicile for so short of a time, like a month, less than a month, that it can be really difficult to catch them, with everything, because within that month there's only like 7 days that they're in an aspect with the planet, and one of those is the opposition. So then it's really just 6 days, 2 squares, 2 sextiles, 2 trines. And if they're not in the right spot to be able to hit like planetary day and planetary hour, then during those 6 times, then it's just, they're gone. That's all you get. Whereas with other planets that are in their signs of domicile or exaltation for longer periods of time, it's easier. You have more chances to kind of look through and find something that fits it all. But for Venus, so that's why it's nice that there's Venus and Taurus options. It's just, there are a lot of times where Venus just kind of like careens through Taurus and Venus, and we never get a chance for anything good. So I mentioned that Western Europe, North Africa gets 2 Venus and Taurus options, but actually looking at it, I'm a little bit skeptical, and we can talk about why. So we've got Venus here in Taurus. Maybe you've already noticed it. But we've got Venus and Taurus here on the ascendant, which is great. We have the moon applying a sextile here from Cancer to Taurus, which is nice. And then at the time, we've got Mercury's day and Venus's hour. So we've got this part. We got the hour, which is great. The moon and Venus are unafflicted. The only issue with the moon is that I mentioned before that we want the moon to have a 12-degree separation because that's kind of when she becomes visible in the sky. This is technically 11 degrees between the sun and the moon here. So I'm going to say, I don't know. I'm skeptical about it being a really good option. I'm going to leave it on the table though, June 26th at 3:20 in the morning. If you're interested in giving this one a try. The moon is technically not combust because combustion happens at 7.5 degrees, but the moon does have like a special 12-ish degree consideration, just sort of like unique to her. So I'm a little disappointed that I didn't notice this gap here wasn't quite wide enough for what we needed. But wait, this is 9 degrees. Can I not count? No, it's 9 degrees because I can't count 9 degrees. So even closer, but still not combust. So I'll leave that to you, whether or not you want to kind of follow that 12 degree from the moon from the sun rule. But the other option for Western Europe, Northern Africa, which fits more kind of similarly with the other ones, again, June 28th, this time at 3:17 in the morning, Venus and Taurus on the ascendant. It is Venus's day and the sun's hour, just like it was for the North Americas. The moon here in Leo is going to apply this square to Venus. We're about 12 degrees separated, which is decently far for a moon aspect. So we're still kind of worrying about this aspect kind of slowing down the talisman, doing whatever it needs to do, being super effective. But we're not worried about it making it weaker or anything like that, making it less ideal. The 2 planets are unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. Neither of the 2 planets are combust. And yeah, we kind of fill over our needs there for Venus, or for a planetary talisman in general, but for Venus one specifically. And so that's always fun. It's always really great when we get a planetary talisman to kind of show up, because I know that those are more popular. Those are more flexible in kind of what they can do, what they can be used for, than like lunar mansions and fixed stars, which tend to have very predetermined powers. Planets have a lot of wiggle room to accomplish different things, which is great for people who need, a lot of different things, who need help on different fronts. But those are our Venus planetary talismans that we have going on. Hopefully, you're not doing anything at around 3 in the morning, and you'll be able to take advantage of these if you're interested in trying them out. So our next lectional opportunity, our 4th one in our list here, is going to be for the 10th Lunar Mansion. And the 10th Mansion is one of my favorites. It is one that is focused all about health and healing, helping people get the care that they need, compassionate and effective care, which is increasingly difficult to get in our world today, sadly. But the 10th Mansion is one that I've had, that my thoughts have really changed on a lot, insofar as like what it can do. When I first got into this, when I first started practicing, I thought the 10th Mansion was very limited on what it could accomplish, but I've watched it kind of do a lot of things for a lot of people, and that's always fun to see it kind of go beyond your expectations. So, good job 10th Lunar Mansion, and I definitely recommend the 10th Lunar Mansion talisman for anybody. So our 10th Lunar Mansion option for Western Europe and Northern Africa is going to be for June 27th at around 8 in the morning, 7:55. So here we're going to have the moon in Cancer in the final degree of Cancer, barely hanging on. And she's going to be applying this conjunction to Mercury here in Leo. So 2 thoughts. The first is you want to make sure that you keep the Cancer ascendant, because if we go into Leo, the Leo ascendant, then the ruler of Leo will be the sun here in the 12th house. Not good. I don't do rulers of the 1st house and the 12th house. We just don't do that. And so we don't want that. The other thing is, I don't typically look to Mercury for health and healing. And part of this is because Mercury is a very disruptive planet. I'm sure that probably comes as a shock to a lot of people. But Mercury's main, Robert Schmidt in his writings characterizes each of the 7 planets as having what he calls a basic nature. So Mercury's basic nature is to contest and to destabilize. And this goes into a lot of Mercury's nature as being poorly defined in a lot of ways. One of Mercury's defining characteristics is that it is indefinable. Or like it is mutable. It changes its form a lot. It changes its expression. It changes what it does. It's benefic with benefic planets. It's malefic with malefic planets. It changes its gender expression depending on what side of the sun it's on, yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot about Mercury that is unstable in a lot of ways. It is able to express a multiplicity of expressions, but in doing so, it's very difficult to work with concretely. And so this is what makes it opposite with like Jupiter, who symbolizes like stability and growth because of that, like the ability for things to grow because they're in a stable environment where they have all their needs met. Mercury is the opposite of that. He's not about that life. So because of that, I don't typically look to Mercury for health-based talismans specifically, just because when we're talking about the body, we need it to be in a stable environment. However, every planet has the ability to be an effective healing talisman, or not every planet has the ability to be an effective participant in a healing talisman, because every planet governs some parts or processes of the human body. And so what ends up happening is that we can take these more difficult planets, whether they're Mercury and his instability, or like even Saturn and his sort of life-denying powers too. And we can focus those in specifically on the parts of the body that they represent and they rule, because they have a vested interest in keeping them healthy and keeping them going and keeping them functioning. So for Mercury, the moon applying to Mercury in the 10th Lunar Mansion talisman is probably not going to be effective generally for people with health issues, unless you have a Mercury ruled ascendant natally. So if you're a Gemini or a Virgo ascendant, then Mercury is definitely going to be a planet that's interested or invested in your health outcomes. If you have nervous system issues, because Mercury rules the nervous system, traditionally referred to as the animal spirits. I get to flex my medieval medical knowledge on you. Watch out. Or like issues with the hands and arms, issues with the voice, with respiration, with sensory issues, with learning disabilities, anything like that, Mercury can help with. So that long spiel to go on about how you don't normally think about Mercury as a healing planet, which is true, for its own reasons, but because every planet has an association with the body, with some aspect of the body, and has a vested interest in seeing that body part or function well, then we can lean into these more difficult, these more hard to pin down planets to work with for that. So 10th Lunar Mansion talisman with the moon applying to Mercury. If you're an individual who is struggling to get treatment or just wants more help getting these, issues, these Mercury specific issues under control, this would be a great option for that. For those who aren't really struggling with anything in that area, this probably isn't going to be a very effective talisman for you, unless you also happen to be a Virgo or a Gemini rising, in which case Mercury is invested in that natally for you. For the Australian continent, their what are we on? 10th Lunar Mansion talisman is going to look very familiar. It's going to be for June 27th at 9 in the morning. Why does that sound so familiar? Where have I heard that before? Oh, because it was the Procyon talisman. So we do have another option for Australia, sort of another way to go, with the same timing for the Procyon talisman that we had. We have the moon on Procyon, applying to Mercury, who was said to be of the nature of Procyon, or sharing a similar nature of Procyon. We could also use this time for a 10th Lunar Mansion talisman if we wanted to where it's more focused specifically on health and healing issues with Mercury-specific issues. Because again, we've got the moon in late Cancer applying the conjunction to Mercury here, and I just went on that whole thing about how Mercury can be used for health. So definitely an option if you want to go this way with it. If you want to maybe fine-tune or specify the health outcomes or health concerns that you might be having to the talisman, then maybe this could be a good option. So I leave it kind of, I offer it up just as like, is a thing that's happening. But in a lot of ways, I just kind of think the Procyon talisman is better because it does have a more general healing and health vibe to it. Whereas Mercury is about very specific healing, it's about very specific issues, about very specific body parts. So I guess the way we could kind of split the difference is if you already know that you're struggling with some sort of Mercury issue, then it could be a really good idea to go to the 10th Lunar Mansion and get that sort of specialized Mercury type care or attention that's unique, that's specific to your situation. Absolutely. For those that don't, then maybe the Procyon Talisman is the better option just because it's more general health. But I'll leave that for you to decide. I think the Procyon Talisman is just better anyway. I tend to value fixed stars a little bit more highly than lunar mansions, especially if they kind of do the same thing. But that might be a little bit of a bias that I personally have, which is sad because I really, 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 really like lunar mansions. So there we go. There we have it. But just some thoughts on that one to work with or to think about. Our next electional opportunity is going to be for the 11th Lunar Mansion, and this is going to be for North America and Western Europe and Northern Africa. Australia is not going to have an opportunity for this talisman. And so the 11th Lunar Mansion is one that I particularly like to use when it comes to issues of employment. The traditional idea of the 11th Lunar Mansion is that it has kind of these dual purposes of helping to secure wealth and also getting favors from individuals in authority. Those are not unusual powers assigned to planetary talismans. So I can't say that's unique in its own, but the way that they're together, the way they're used together, tend to be more useful for traditional employment, for getting a job, for negotiating benefits or salary from a job, negotiating a raise, a promotion, anything like that. The 11th Lunar Mansion is a really good option for these types of negotiations or this type of thing. I do not see the 11th Lunar Mansion perform very well for individuals who are self-employed. Ask me how I know. So there are other talismans that seem to do that better, but the 11th Lunar Mansion does work very well for people who are sort of traditionally employed, quote unquote. So for North America, this option takes place on June 28th at 1614. And isn't it crazy how many talismans we fit into like a 2-day period? The 26th, the 27th, and the 28th. It is just like, we have Procyon, we have Venus, we have the 9th Lunar Mansion, the 10th Lunar Mansion, the 11th Lunar Mansion. It's just a lot. So these first couple of days are very busy, and then it kind of tapers off after this. So it's very front-loaded, this new moon election cycle is. But here we're going to have June 28th at 1614, so just like 4:15 in the afternoon. We're going to have the moon on the midheaven in the 11th Lunar Mansion, which is great. Excuse me. And at this time, she's going to be applying this square to Venus. Venus, a benefic planet, she wants us to have things. She wants us to have money. So this might be something that's better suited for individuals who are trying to negotiate better salaries or better wages, just because Venus is more about the money aspect of it rather than like the award aspect of it, if that makes sense. She's more about the money than about like the promotion or the responsibility or the authority or whatever it is that a higher or whatever it is that a higher position might give you. She's really more about the benefits, unless you're working in a Venus ruled field. So something else to consider. The planet is going to have the good thing about the moon planet aspects within Lunar Mansion talismans is they're not, how do I put this? They're not significant when it comes to the talisman being effective. They're not super significant when it comes to within Lunar Mansion talismans. They're not super important when it comes to the thing actually working. What they're important for is it paints the picture of what it is, of what it can be best applied to, because it's better to have how do I put this? It's better that the outcome of the talisman, the goal of the talisman, the intention of the talisman, be pointed towards the planet that the moon is applying to in some way, that it's informed by it, because it's what's going to have an easier time coming out, rather than just sort of whatever it is that you have in mind. So we kind of have two different funnels of intention that we go through. The first is the mansion itself. Lunar mansions can only do certain things. So if you're trying to get like a relationship going with the 11th Lunar Mansion, it's not going to work. You're done. Go somewhere else. You can't sit with us here. And then you have to go through the funnel of the planet itself, the planet that the moon is applying to, insofar as that's sort of like the partner that helps build it out, puts its own coat of paint on the outcome. So that was sort of that explanation, that idea, that idea behind that. We don't super focus on the planet that the moon is applying to, in that it's irrelevant to the effectiveness of the talisman itself, because that's really more the moon and the lunar mansion's job. Where the planet comes in is helping to specify how we might use this talisman in effective ways, because that planet is going to have a hand in what the what the face of the outcome is. So something to keep in mind when you're making any talisman, really. How can I best set myself up for success by flowing with where the energy is going? The energy is going to Venus, in this case, through the vehicle of the 11th lunar mansion. How does that come out the best? Well, Venus doesn't really care about she doesn't really care about the authority that you carry in your job. She doesn't care how highly ranked you are within like your job hierarchy. She's not impressed by that. What she is impressed by is the benefits that you get, your salary, things like that. So keep that in mind when working with this. Then from here we go and look at the ruler of the first house. We have Scorpio on the ascendant, which points us to Mars up here in Virgo. Mars is doing okay up here in Virgo, hanging out, not afflicted by Saturn, not combust the sun or anything like that. The ascendant degree is also unafflicted by Saturn. And the moon as well, unafflicted by Saturn or Mars. We're coming to the conjunction there, but not a big deal right now. We're still 14 degrees out, so not a huge deal. And there we go. That's our 11th lunar mansion election for North America. So for our Western Europe and Northern African version, I kind of had to change it a bit because I initially had the moon in like a weird place. I don't know what I was thinking. And so I didn't like it, but I moved it to make it look more like the North American version, which takes place now June 28th at 1644. And, like I said, it looks like the North American version of the chart, where the moon is in the 11th mansion here, and she's applying the square to Venus. So again, we're going to focus more on the Venetian aspect of the 11th lunar mansion here, more focused on benefits, more focused on salary than about like negotiating or receiving like a high ranking position or anything like that. Oh, the sun went behind a cloud and it got super dark. And at the same time, we're going to look to Mars here as the ruler of the first house. Mars here in Virgo. The moon is unafflicted by Saturn or Mars. Mars is unafflicted by Saturn. The ascendant degree is unafflicted by Saturn or Mars or anything like that. So again, another good setup here for the 11th lunar mansion. That repeats a lot of the winning points from the North American version of the chart. Squares, of course, are not a super desirable aspect to have, but our catchphrase here, any aspect is better than no aspect, unless it's in opposition, because they're trash. So while we prefer the more harmonious aspects of the sextile and trine, just because they make things happen a little bit easier, square aspects are still great because they form connections with planets. And they're not inherently like adversarial like the opposition is, the opposition is just a lot of energy to overcome, to the point where it's like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? What's the point? Squares are much more manageable. They take a bit more energy. They can be stressful, but the effort to reward ratio is in a much better spot, is how we're going to put that. Our next selection opportunity is going to be an Australian exclusive, and this is going to be for the 18th lunar mansion. The 18th lunar mansion is another mansion that's focused on healing. It works a little bit differently than the 10th lunar mansion, which tends to be more about like supporting health or getting people into the right hands of like the right healthcare team to help them overcome or help manage whatever it is that they're struggling with. The 18th lunar mansion is a little bit more like surgical in its approach. It's more about identifying the issue, going in and sort of getting rid of the issue. So it can be actually very helpful for those individuals who need to undergo surgery to make sure that we're kind of going after the right thing. But even for those who aren't undergoing surgery, it can be really good to help like fight infections or just anything like that. The 18th lunar mansion is it's a decent healing talisman. It's not my favorite one. That would be the 10th one. But it's a good one to go to for like specific needs for a specific approach to healing. So the time for this election is going to be on July 5th at 20:01, so just around 8 o'clock. And here we're going to have the moon in the 18th mansion on the midheaven. And at this time, she's going to be applying a trine to the sun. It's a really nice spot here. And this is the reason why it's an Australian exclusive. This is the only one that lines up with this very well. And so, you know, I always enjoy sun-moon aspects when it comes to lunar mansions, especially with the healing talismans, the lunar mansions that are involved with healing, just because I feel like the sun is probably the most powerful planet when it comes to health and healing. The sun represents the vital force of the human body, represents the heart, and so having this sort of connection with the sun, who symbolizes a lot of these really important health aspects of the human body, and also its power to dispel or get rid of or disinfect, we could say, is all really great kind of symbols or powers to bring into something that is focused on healing or making us better. So that's why I like the sun. I think it's the better planet to choose from between the 6th. Jupiter and Venus are good alternatives for healing talismans. And then I wouldn't go to Mercury, Mars, or Saturn. We talked about this a little bit before. I wouldn't go to them unless it was like a very specific and intentional choice to go to them, like to help match the healing, whatever is going on. But from here, we look to the ruler of the first house, which is Saturn here, because Aquarius rules the ascendant. Saturn here in Aries, just, you know, chilling out and dealing with being in Aries, but unafflicted by Mars, not combust the sun. The ascendant degree also unafflicted by Mars, and the moon is unafflicted by Mars and Saturn, and is far enough away from the sun to not be combust as well. So everything here lines up pretty well for the 18th lunar mansion for Australia. So enjoy that, Australia. It's always fun when we get an Australian exclusive. They're a little, I guess they're a little rare. So our next lecture opportunity is actually going to be for a Jupiter planetary talisman. I told you we were getting into like benefic summer. And this is a talismanic opportunity that North America, Western Europe, and North Africa are going to get. Unfortunately, Australia is going to sit it out. And we can talk about what it is that makes it not viable in the Australian chart. But going ahead and looking into our North American version of this, that's going to be for July 18th at 4:44 in the morning. Angel numbers. And here we're going to have Jupiter. So just like our Venus considerations, when we're talking about like what it is that makes a planetary talisman for Venus, you want Jupiter to be in a sign it does well in. Jupiter exalted in Cancer, perfect. You want that to be on the angle, so either on the ascendant or the midheaven, and that's what we have here, Jupiter and Cancer on the ascendant. You want the moon to be immediately applying an aspect to Jupiter, and here we have the moon in Taurus applying a sextile to Jupiter and Cancer. And then we want it to also be either the planet's day or the planet's hour. And at this time, I know you can't see it, we've got Jupiter day and Mars hour. So we've got the one that we need. And then after that, we're looking to make sure that there's not any like significant issue with Jupiter or with the moon that would prohibit us from moving forward with it. So Saturn and Jupiter do have a square aspect. There's a square between these two planets. It's 7 degrees wide, and it's mutually separating. Like you can see Jupiter moving forward, Saturn moving backwards. I think that's fine, but I would leave that up to you to decide kind of on your own where your own comfort level is with moiety, like with orbs here between Saturn and Jupiter. This is not the only Jupiter in Cancer talismanic opportunity we're going to get. We get like at least one every month from now until November, but I can't remember where they all fall in the world off the top of my head. So this is kind of like our first attempt, our first real option for it, but there are ones that are going to have more space between Jupiter and Saturn coming up later if you choose to go ahead and wait for that as well. Totally viable. The moon is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. We don't have an issue there. Not combust the sun. Same with Jupiter. We're past the combustion of the sun here. And the ascendant degree is also safe from both the malefic planets. So there you have an option for Jupiter here, depending on if you feel like 7 degrees is wide enough of an orb from Saturn, with it mutually separating and stuff like that, to not be a problem. So for the Western Europe and North African version of this Jupiter and Cancer talisman, that's going to take place on July 18th at around 4:46 in the morning. And here we're going to have Jupiter and Cancer on the ascendant here, with the moon applying the sextile to Jupiter here after having separated the sextile from the sun. And this is the big major difference between the North American version and the Western European and North African version, is that the moon is in Aries instead of in Taurus. Obviously, the ideal would be the moon in Taurus. Having the moon in her sign of exaltation is a really great way to kind of bolster the moon, to reinforce the moon, which is always really lovely. It's not a huge concern of ours at this point. And by that I mean, I don't really rank the moon sign super high as like what we have to make sure that we get. It's not a super high priority for me. because there are other more difficult connections or configurations to get to where I wouldn't toss them out just because the moon is in a sign she doesn't do well in. But it is always kind of like a nice bonus treat for us if we can get it. So I'm sorry, Western Europe, and North Africa, that you weren't able to have this with the moon in Taurus. But after that, it's kind of the same things that we talked about with the North American version, where Jupiter and Saturn are in a square aspect. It's 7 degrees wide. It's mutually separating. Saturn's retrograde going this way, back into Pisces. Jupiter is direct and going this way further into Cancer. So they're both moving on from each other. I think that's fine distance with that in mind. But like I've said in the North American version, this is only the first Jupiter and Cancer talisman that we're going to get. There are going to be more coming up in the next few months. So definitely feel free to wait if you're uncomfortable with the proximity of the Saturn square, because there will be more later on where this is non-existent, where Jupiter's so far in Cancer that there's really no connection here. So those are going to be available later on. I assume I can't tell you right now what you have to go back to the Planetary elections 2025, like for the year ahead video, to double check and see which one of those are going to be available for your location. I don't remember off the top of my head. So hopefully this is not your only Jupiter and Cancer talisman option. I wish that everybody had a billion of them to take advantage of. But aside from that, Jupiter's not afflicted by Mars. The moon's not afflicted by Mars. The ascendant degree is not afflicted by Mars or Saturn. The moon's not afflicted by Saturn either, just for completion's sake. I forgot this part. I forgot. The other part is that you want it to be either Jupiter's day or hour, and it is both Jupiter's day and Jupiter's hour. So that's a good addition there too. And so that is that Jupiter and Cancer talismanic option for Western Europe, North Africa. So I mentioned before, we can talk about what it is about the Australian timing that doesn't make it work for Jupiter and Cancer talisman this pass. And so here would be the first option, July 18th at 6:32. Jupiter and Cancer on the ascendant. It's Jupiter's day, but the moon at 23 degrees Aries applies a sextile to the sun at 25 degrees of Cancer. I'm sorry, a square to the sun, my bad, it's a square here. A square to the sun at 25 degrees Cancer before it applies the sextile to Jupiter, and that doesn't work for me. I think it is very important. I think it is super important, high priority, deal breaker priority for planetary talismans to have the moon applied to the planet that the talisman is for. If the moon's function in astrological magic is to carry our prayers and our petitions to the planets, and then to transmit those responses back to us, I see no reasoning behind why you would have the moon applied to any other planet than the planet that the talisman is being made for. And that's just me. It's a very common thing I see on people's shops, people who sell talismans. They'll be like, here's a Mercury talisman, but the moon applies to the sun. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's me. I don't know. That makes no sense to me. And I pass that on to you as something to think about, I suppose. So this cannot function, even though we have Jupiter in its exaltation on the ascendant, and during Jupiter's day, because the moon does not apply to Jupiter, Jupiter's not talking to us. The sun is talking to us, and this is not a sun talisman. So we have to pass on that one. And then if we put Jupiter on the midheaven, which would be the next option, if I can get it there. There we go. If we get Jupiter on the midheaven, then we have Jupiter and Cancer on the midheaven. The moon has separated from the sun. You see 25:41 minutes to 25:56 minutes. So we have separated the square to the sun, and now we're applying the sextile to Jupiter, which is great. It's also, oh my gosh, Venus's day and Jupiter's hour, which is awesome. So we've got the Jupiter hour that we need. I guess I'll circle it. But our issue here is that Venus rules the ascendant, and Venus is in a pretty close square with Mars. So that's a ruler of the first house being afflicted, which is not cool. So those are the reasons why Australia doesn't have a Jupiter in Cancer election this time around. And then by the time that Jupiter makes it back to the ascendant, we have this potential where we have Jupiter in Cancer on the ascendant, and the moon is applying a really nice sextile, but it's Venus's day and Mercury's hour. So we have no sort of temporal relation with Jupiter here. So we miss out on that key piece. So unfortunately, We just can't get our pieces to line up the way that we need them to for the Australian version, and that's why we don't have a Jupiter and Cancer talisman this time around for Australia. Then our final electional opportunity for this month is going to be for the 4th Lunar Mansion. And the 4th Lunar Mansion is one that we use primarily for pest control. It helps rid pests from an area. And it can do a bunch of other things too, but this is our main focus. This is what I'm gonna say we're gonna use it for. So it helps to rid an area of pests. And to do that, we have to be a little bit more, we get to do more fun things with our electional rules, which tend to be very focused on like safety, protection, stability. We get to do the opposite of that, which is always really fun to kind of like let your hair down and just go wild on a chart for a minute. These charts aren't super wild, but we'll do our best with them, is what we're going to say. I've had much more crazy, chaotic 4th Lunar Mansion elections in the past. But so the 4th Lunar Mansion is primarily used for cursing. That's kind of its big thing. But it's also said to be used for removing venomous animals from a location, which I interpret as more like general pest control. Like we can kind of fine tune that for general pest control. So we have options here for North America, Western Europe, and North Africa. Australia doesn't have one right now. Theirs wasn't quite as good as I wanted it to be to really kind of sell the idea. So here we're going to have the moon in the 4th mansion on the ascendant. And she's going to be applying this trine to retrograde Mercury. So this is always fun. The moon's applications to retrograde planets never really work out well. They never really hold together the manifestation of the talisman very well. So when we're trying to apply that to like positive things, the idea is that the planet doesn't have the resources to keep it together. So it might be very useful for like a limited time, to where you get the thing, but then it kind of like crumbles in front of you. Like it just like slips through your fingers kind of a thing. Or alternatively, depending on the planet and what else is going on, it may never be able to really bring it about. So with the moon applying to retrograde Mercury here, especially with Mercury being in the 4th house, which is a little bit deeper than I like to read these, the idea is that like the pests are unable to get a hold in your home or like around your home kind of a thing. So very helpful for kind of pushing back on or hindering any sort of like pest infestation from really taking root or keeping it from growing further is kind of the idea that we're going here with this Mercury. Let's see. At the same time, I wanted the moon to be more afflicted, but I wasn't able to get any like real good afflictions with her or the ascendant degree. But what we were able to get is the ruler of the 1st house is Venus here in Gemini, and she's afflicted by the square with Mars. And so that's kind of the energy that we lean into with like these more pest control or these more like waning, destructive oriented talismans, which is what a pest control talisman is basically. We want to make important parts of the planet of the chart weak, and like imbecilic would be another word for it, and afflicted, because that all transfers to the pest that we're targeting the talisman towards, whatever that is. So here we've got like the moon making it difficult for them for any sort of pest to really take root in a home. And then Venus being afflicted by Mars shows us a lot of like the hurt and the damage that comes to the pest, and hopefully, expels them and makes them want to go somewhere else. And so that's the North American version of it. And the Western European and Northern African version is July 19th at 1:20 in the morning. And it's very similar to the North American version. The moon's just backed up a little bit. We've got the moon in Taurus on the ascendant here. Applying, now that I'm kind of reflecting on it, I think I described this aspect as a trine between between the moon and Mercury, but it is a square aspect. The moon is applying a square to retrograde Mercury here, and kind of those same ideas of retrograde planets show a struggle or incapability of making something permanent or bringing something to kind of fruition. So the idea here is that the retrograde motion of Mercury makes it more difficult for an infestation to be present in an area, makes it more difficult for it to take root and to be stabilized. The idea is that it kind of goes through its own sort of internal, it's not the best environment for it. So they hopefully on their own will decide to go elsewhere. That's kind of the basic idea with it. And then Venus, ruler of the 1st house here, is still in this square aspect with Mars, which shows, of course, damage or conflict or friction or whatever between the pests and some other thing, whatever it is, which hopefully makes the area less hospitable to them, to where they will leave kind of their own accord. And that's usually how I always do pest control talismans. I'm a big softie, so I never like to do like the kind of scorched earth approach of like kill them all, get rid of them all. There are times where I could be that way, I'm sure, but I tend to be more of like this is my home. You need to go somewhere else. Like you can't stay. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Kind of an idea. So for me, my pest control talisman's more focused on the idea of like expelling, getting rid of, making them go somewhere else where they'll be more at home rather than here. But that I leave kind of to you, insofar as like how much force you choose to like approach it with. But all right, everybody, those are all our elections for this lunar cycle, for our Cancer new moon to our Leo new moon. We had a pretty good showing of elections for a few different options, for a few different things. So hopefully there's something here that can help you out with whatever kind of issue that you're dealing with. We have some nice Venus in Taurus, and we have some Jupiter in Cancer options coming up, and those options are going to expand a little bit. Not Venus in Taurus, I don't think. I think we're about done with Venus in Taurus. Yeah, but Jupiter is going to keep going throughout the summer. We'll have some Sun planetary talismans during the summer as well, the Sun in Leo. And then in October, we'll have some more options for Jupiter in Cancer and some for probably Venus in Libra, before we kind of finish off our year. So we've got some good things to look forward to. We have a good smattering of things to look forward to coming up in this summer and in October for planetary options. Of course, we'll have lunar mansions and fixed stars sprinkled within. But thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully there was something here that sparked your interest, and you can kind of move forward with working with that. But everybody take care, and I will see you all again on our Leo new moon.